Starting us off at number 10, the Old Redfield Road. Said to be extremely active with spirits, keep your eyes peeled if you ever find yourself driving down this road. Those that try find that their flashlights and radios suddenly stop working, and some even say their cars begin acting up as soon as they start to approach. One driver in fact said that the hood of their car flew open on site, and when they went to go and check it out, there was no explanation for why it would have done that. Visitors claim that countless ghosts roam the road, walking up and down, likely coming from the nearby cemetery, and that they feel a sense of deep, unsettling anxiety until they turn off the Old Redfield Road. So maybe if you do visit, just find an alternate route. Next up at number 9, Cotter Bridge. Located in a small town of less than 900 people, during the day the bridge is a world-renowned hotspot for trout fishing, visited by residents and tourists alike. But things take a turn after the sun goes down, and locals say that this bridge is haunted by some truly terrifying spirits. Residents say that at night you can hear the cries of an infant coming from the bridge, and the sounds of young people playing for hours and hours. But most haunting of all is the woman who can be seen sprinting from vicious hounds. No one knows who she is or why she's being chased, but the fear of her screaming voice has scared residents from ever daring to get too close. Coming in at number 8, Fort Smith Courthouse. During the late 19th century, Fort Smith was the site of many sentenced to be hanged. In fact, it was rather notorious for it, as the presiding judge at the time, named Isaac C. Parker, got the nickname the Hanging Judge from sentencing a whopping 160 people to their death, 79 of which received the punishment. The hangings happened outside the courthouse in the gallows, perhaps as a warning sign for all to see what happened to criminals. And it's believed the condemned men of the jail still roam the grounds seeking revenge on Isaac Parker. Many today say they've had frightening experiences while at the courthouse, especially in the gallows. Visitors claim to have heard gavels banging, seen ropes swinging when there was no wind, and one groundskeeper even claims to have spoken with the ghost of Isaac Parker himself. Next up at number 7, the Clayton House. Originally built in the 1800s as a Civil War hospital, it wasn't until 1882 when William Clayton moved his family into the now historical home. The family seemed to have a fairly happy life in their home, but I guess with roots as a hospital, ghosts flock to it and continue to haunt it to this day. The former director of the site, Martha, says that as soon as she started working there, she knew something was off. Doors would slam in the middle of the night, she would hear footsteps from down the hall when no one was there, and one room on the second floor would always sound like music was playing from inside. Then in 2008, a carpenter who was doing some repairs on the building took pictures to keep track of the progress, but when those photos got developed, he saw a woman dressed in brown lurking in the back of one of his photos, and he wasn't the only one to claim to have seen her lurking in the corners. After a while, Clayton's house had kind of a reputation, and so paranormal investigators started visiting, and using EVPs they got recordings of a man shouting obscenities at someone named Anna, which piqued their interest as one of Clayton's daughters was named Anne. But maybe most terrifying was one woman who says that she was standing by herself in the hotel when her hair was tugged hard. She turned around to see who had snuck up on her, assuming it was a prank, but no one was around and she was all alone. Next up at number 6, the Toltec Mounds. A hiking trail might not be the first place you'd expect to be terrifyingly haunted, but it makes much more sense once you know that it leads through the remains of an ancient civilization. More officially referred to as the Plum Bayou Mounds, they were once home to a large group of people beginning around 600 AD. But what no one has been able to figure out since is their sudden and mysterious disappearance in 1050 AD. It's thought that the the mounds were used for a variety of different purposes, but we know for sure that at least one was a burial ground, and as you can imagine, that is where most of the ghost sightings have occurred. Visitors who pass through the trail say they've seen strange apparitions of what looked like ancient people, along with mysterious orbs of light popping out of nowhere, and some say that if you walk by at night, you'll hear footsteps of the ancient civilization that will send you running as far away as you can. Coming in at number 5, the Basin Park Hotel. This hotel has long been the site of many paranormal sightings, although no one knows exactly why so many ghosts conjugate in this building. One belief is because the hotel possesses magical abilities due to the famous spring waters that it's built beside. During the 1800s, the indigenous people of the area talked about their holy springs, and it led many to believe that Eureka Springs had healing powers that could cure ailments and crippling conditions. Maybe these holy waters are what make the spirits more visible to the human eye today. Most famously, in room 307 lies the ghost of a cowboy who's been known to taunt the guests who stay there, waking them up in the middle of the night. Other entities that visitors claim to have witnessed are the young, translucent woman with steel blue eyes and cotton candy blonde hair, as well as a girl who runs around in pigtails and a yellow dress. Those that stay say they often see various orbs of light appearing around the grounds as if out of nowhere, and that objects will move all on their own very frequently. So if I were you, I'd just find a different hotel to stay at on your visit. Coming in at number 4, the King Opera House. While it's safe to assume you'd expect some kind of drama at the opera, usually it's left to the actors on stage. Said to be haunted by the ghost of a young actor named Charles Tolson, many believe they've seen the famous man roam the halls where he had his last performance ever. As the story goes, Tolson was a talented young man and owner of a traveling actors company that happened to be performing at the King Opera House for a week at the end of September in 1903. Tolson caught the eye of a young woman named Allie Parchman, who was just 17 but bored to death by her town and looking for adventure. But Allie's father got word that she intended to leave town with the young man and elope, and this made him furious. Her father ran down to the opera house to confront Tolson and kill him. When he arrived, he shot him 3 times, and although Tolson didn't die then, his life was over by the next day while in the hospital. Visitors of the opera house say they feel a strange sensation when they enter, like they're being watched constantly, and some even claim to have witnessed him lurking the halls in his Victorian cape and top hat. Next up at number 3, the Crescent Hotel and Spa. Not only is this Victorian beauty believed to be one of the most haunted places in Arkansas, but some have even said it might be one of the most haunted places in all of America. Before its time as a haunted hotel, it was a hospital run by a crooked doctor who fooled his cancer patients into thinking that there was a cure. So as you can imagine, it's riddled with spirits with a vengeance. Over the years, countless guests and staff have come forward telling their tales, claiming to have heard strange sensations, slamming doors, abrupt waking in the middle of the night, and even seeing full-bodied apparitions while staying in room 218. It is believed that the room is haunted by the ghost of Michael, who was a builder for the hotel that fell off the roof to his death back in 1885 and landed right in front of where room 218 sits. Others claim they've seen a middle-aged man with a white mustache sitting at the bar who vanishes out of sight. And in 1987, a guest said they saw a nurse pushing a gurney down the hallway in the middle of the night. But maybe most terrifying of all is room 202, where allegedly someone managed to photograph a ghost and prove its existence. Coming in at number 2, the Peel Mansion. Back in 1875, this mansion was built by a man named Samuel Peel. He was a US congressman and he lived in the home with his daughter Minnie. Both Peel and Minnie are said to haunt the house today, roaming the halls dressed in white, and often Minnie will play the piano if no one is in the room. But despite being the people the mansion is named after, they might not be the creepiest ghosts to haunt its halls. After the Peel family sold the mansion, a couple named Mr. and Mrs. English moved in with their family. One of their daughters, Marjorie, however, became very ill, and after discovering that she'd suffered from a burst appendix, a surgeon informed the family that she was not going to make it. After 10 days, Marjorie died and they covered her body in a sheet. But creepily, only a few hours after being pronounced dead, someone saw the sheet move. Marjorie was alive and went on to live for many more healthy years. But this troubled some of the staff on the farm, who believed that her spirit hadn't gotten back into her body and was somehow trapped under that sheet that others had seen moving. Years went by and Marjorie went back to her childhood home, only to find that the room where people thought she had died was closed off. When she asked why, she was told it was haunted by a little girl. But the question was, is it Minnie or somehow the lost spirit from Marjorie's almost death? And last up in our number 1 spot, Highway 365. The legend began back in 1973 when a man picked up a girl on a bridge in the night. She was covered in bruises and cuts and looked very scared. She told the man that she had been in a car accident and asked if he could drive her home. The man complied, and when they got to the house she said was hers, she suddenly vanished from his car. Too stunned to realize what he'd just witnessed, the man went up to the door of the house anyway. The door was answered by the girl's father, who said that she had just died on that very bridge last month. But he wasn't the only one to see the girl in white, as she became known. The next year, a different man picked up a young woman on a bridge and drove her home. When they arrived, she asked if he could knock on the door since the house was dark. But when the door opened, the girl was gone, and the mother explained that her daughter had died 1 year earlier that same night. Finally, another year went by, and another man picked up the same girl dressed in white near a bridge in the rain. He offered her his coat to keep her warm, and when they got to her house, she vanished along with his coat. After talking with the dead girl's parent, who said she visits every year on the anniversary of her death, he went to visit the girl's headstone only to find his missing coat draped across it.
Number 10. Tennessee State Prison. Coming up first on our list of spots to avoid when you're driving through America at its best is Tennessee State Prison. I mean, hell, you probably want to avoid that on a good day, let alone if it's haunted. Though the prison may have shut its doors in 1993, it's remained a popular spot for dark tourists and paranormal enthusiasts who snuck in on some less than legal means to try and scope out if there's still any lingering spirits hanging around Old Sparky, the nickname given to the infamous electric chair inside the prison, which served as the last seat for countless inmates. Those who've been brave enough to venture forth have reported hearing unexplained clanging, a dragging of chains, footsteps following them as they walk through the empty halls, and feelings of inescapable dread approaching Old Sparky. Maybe that's a sign it's best to let the dead lie. And hey, my friends, hope you're all having a good holiday, but if you're looking for a reason to sneak away from the table for a bit, why not click through, spend the rest of the day with the most amazing gang, watch our videos, and toss a subscribe if you're feeling that generous. Okay, moving on, no more plugs, don't worry. Number 9, the Wheatlands Plantation. The Wheatlands Plantation has a surprisingly high amount of bloodshed packed onto one property. It's no wonder it's considered one of the most haunted spots in the entire state. In all the years since its construction, at least 70 people have lost their lives there on one property. Through battles in the Revolutionary War and Civil Wars, what contributed to a majority of the body count, although in one famous case, after the estate was willed to the grandson of the owner, the grandson's jealous father tried to take it by force. A brawl ensued and the father was slain by a fire poker. Although the blood has been washed from the floor countless times, visitors say that it keeps reappearing without fail. If you're curious, the Wheatlands Plantation offers guided ghost tours for those looking to set out on a little spectral sightseeing. You want to go too, Evie? You want to go on a little spectral sightseeing ghost tours, you ghost? Number 8, the Christopher Taylor House. The Christopher Taylor House is probably the oldest house in the entire state. It was first built all the way back in 1777. It was a fresh new cabin for a fledgling developing country. With a house that old, you're bound to have accumulated some spirits over the years, no doubt. Well, maybe the original owners liked the place so much they just never wanted to leave, as visitors to the Taylor House have claimed that they see people with a knack for historical cosplay wandering around the property in 17th century attire. Now, this could be people, late to a historical fair maybe, or it could still be the ghosts of the original owners. There's even rumors that the ghost of Andrew Jackson, America's 7th president and famous bad boy, still haunts the spot. One paranormal investigator claims that they talked to Andrew Jackson's ghost, who told them about a duel he had in 1778. God, he's still going on about that one, eh? Move on, man. It's been like 200 years. Number 7, Cragfont. Coming up next is the one and only Cragfont. Cragfont is a historic house in Tennessee, formerly owned by one James Winchester, who was an army general. He built the house personally in 1798, setting out to make a castle fit for an esteemed revolutionary general like Winchester. Winchester lived a quiet life in the home, but future residents wouldn't be so lucky. Country music star Conway Twitty, who no doubt is infinitely more famous for being the butt of a lot of Family Guy jokes than he is a country music star, once reported after staying at the house he had to leave after he was being pelted by flying objects that were thrown around the house. The Cragfont house offers ghost tours, where guests have reported seeing strange things in the upstairs nursery, claiming that when walking by you can see candle lights being lit from inside, and sometimes the figures of people in 17th century attire, watching and waiting. Number 6, Shiloh National Park. Any place where a massive amount of death and suffering is occurred is bound to be a supernatural spot for haunted activity. Well, in 1862, during the Battle of Shiloh, which is part of the Civil War, there were over 23,000 casualties, which at the time was more bloodshed that occurred in any American war up to that point, and all of this was in one single battle at one single national park. So is it any surprise then that park goers claim that sometimes they can see the ponds of the park running red with blood? Or how many stories there are of people coming across the lost ghosts of Civil War soldiers wandering through reliving their final agonizing moments. Nothing more embarrassing, I imagine, than setting down the blanket for the family picnic only to have somebody lumbering over bleeding asking if you have any gauze you can put on his bayonet wound. Number 5, the Lots House. Another place with deep roots to the Civil War is the Lots House. This house saw the Battle of Franklin, an extremely bloody battle that took the lives of over 8,000 soldiers. The Lots family fled, obviously not looking to be a part of that, and when they returned, they found bodies stacked all over their property. Visitors claim that the Lots family is still trapped inside, and that you can see the ghost of a little girl wandering around lost, and the ghost of a woman can be seen from the 2nd floor, crying out for her lost loved ones. If you're curious enough to explore for yourself, the Lots House does offer ghost tours, but I feel like I should tell you. The Travel Channel once dubbed the Lots House the 2nd most terrifying place in America. And number 1 is your local Denny's at 3 in the morning. Number 4, Meeman Forest. Okay, I'm going to be totally level with you. When I started doing this video, I was researching haunted spots in Tennessee, and this one immediately stood out to me, and now I actually want to go there. The Meeman Forest is an absolutely picturesque, beautiful hiking trail, and it is also said to be home to one of Tennessee's most famous ghosts, the Pig Man. The ghost of a factory worker who was disfigured horribly, making his face look like that of a pig. And now in death, he wears the head of a pig over his own and wanders through the forest seeking victims and retribution. He's got his own bridge, Pigman Bridge, that was what lit me onto him. And if you're looking for him directly, legend says that if you're looking for an audience, you park your car in the middle of the bridge, flash your headlights 3 times in a row, and call out into the night, "Pigman!" and he'll make himself known to you. Whether or not you want his attention is another story entirely, or whether or not he'll be taking home you as the bacon. Bringing home the bacon. I was trying to do a pun there. You guys can cut that if that didn't work. Doesn't make sense to me saying it either. Number 3, the Scott County Jail. The Scott County Jail was built in 1904, and almost a perfect 100 years later, closed its gates in 2008. Although it was a fair bit smaller than the average jail, only ever housing up to 50 inmates at a time during its operational period, it was still a jail. Susceptible to all the same pitfalls of any other jail, filled with people at their worst, powerful dark energy just swirling through the air. But this prison would get a second chance after serving out its sentence, and would reopen as a paranormal and true crime museum. The new owners claim that the spot is a hot spot for paranormal activity, and photos they've taken from inside the jail from fledgling ghost hunters show shadowy figures manifesting behind people on the tours. Eerie stuff. Now, is it all just stuff to drum up business for their tours, or could there really be something lingering in the Scott County Jail? You'll have to go yourself to find out. Number 2. The Nashville Cemetery. The Nashville Cemetery is one of the oldest cemeteries in the state, so it's no surprise that it's one of the most haunted as well. Otherwise, it wouldn't be on this list. I'm not going to tell you about a regular unhaunted cemetery. Among the many bodies laid to their final rest in this plot is one Ann Sanders, the ghost of a woman who, after running away from her husband after an argument, tragically plummeted to her death over a cliff above the Cumberland River. Her husband, distraught, pulled a piece of the boulder she fell off and had it carved into her headstone, installing a lantern up top so she could have a light to forever guide her in the afterlife. Isn't that sweet? Naturally, the headstone is very unusual and looks really different from all the other ones, and so it attracts a lot of attention from tourists coming to visit the cemetery. If the stories are to be believed, it's also attracting attention from spirits. People say late at night, usually after midnight, that they can hear wailing, crying, and sobbing seemingly emanating from the bizarre boulder headstones. Some stories as well say that they see a man in old attire who comes by at night to keep the lantern lit. Ugh, eerie. And finally, number 1, the Bell Witch Cave. Easily the most famous haunted spot in Tennessee, and maybe one of the most haunted spots in the entire country. The Bell Witch is a very famous urban legend dating back to the 19th century, where a farming family, the Bells, were relentlessly haunted and pursued by an evil entity of an old crone known now as the Bell Witch. There would be horrible creatures lurking around the farm, like these weird bunny dog chimeras. There was a constant laughing that sounded like it was coming from the walls. The children would complain of vermin attacking them in their sleep, and that's just the stuff I remember off my heart. If you look up the Bell Witch haunting, there is so much going on, and I'm surprised there's not more movies about it, to be honest. Once, even, Andrew Jackson, 7th President of the United States, famous President Bad Boy, wanted to visit the Bell Witch property himself because he wanted to see if any of these rumors were true. But when he arrived, his horses outright refused to even approach the property. They froze up by the carriage. If that doesn't tell you the place is haunted, what will? Now, this spot in particular is the cave just a little bit outside the property. The whole place is haunted, but the cave is thought to be where the Bell Witch either made her home or where she fled to after she was finished with John Bell and his family. One legend says that when the Bell children went to explore the cave, one of them was pulled out by their feet by an invisible entity that had warned them not to go exploring inside of it. Now today, you can purchase a ticket to explore the Bell Witch Cave with a tour guide, but really, I'd say you should be careful about it. You should be careful about any cave you're going into, but you should be triply careful about one that famously possibly had a witch.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Tat Tak School. This school has remained abandoned since 1988, and for fair reason. The city in which the school resides has a dark history that is said to include a few World War era massacres and all of the atrocities involving that sort of thing. It is said that the remains from some of these horrible acts were buried in the hill next to the school. Shortly before the school closed in 1988, the headmistress took her own life in one of the bathrooms while wearing a red dress, supposedly leaving behind a spirit that appears to people dressed in red. The creepiest story relating to this haunting happened in 2011 when students were exploring the abandoned school. While here, one of the students saw the lady in red, which led to them all running for the hills, but as they began to run away, one of the students began showing strange, violent behavior that had never been seen before. An ambulance ended up being called because of the entire ordeal. This is all to say that this school appears as just a broken down, forgotten about place, but there's clearly something more sinister here. In our number 9 spot today, we have 31 Granville Road. If you're a person who is interested in true crime, you might be familiar with this place already because it is the site of the infamous and horrifying Hello Kitty killing. Back in 1999, a 23-year-old woman named Fan Men Yi was working as a host at a nightclub and needed money to help support herself and her young son when she made the decision to steal the wallet of one of the clients of her workplace. She was caught for the stealing, and while she returned the money, the man demanded that she also pay him a steep fine in return for the action. She said she just needed some time to gather the cost he was asking for, but unfortunately just a few days later, this man, with the help of some accomplices, would kidnap Fan and keep her locked up for a month. She sadly suffered incredibly horrific things and later succumbed to her injuries and passed away. The address of where this all took place was an apartment building at 31 Granville Road. In 2012, the apartment was demolished, and in 2016, a new hotel was built on the site, but even still, people have reported being haunted by the ghost of this young woman. Whether haunted or not, hearing the details of this story, it totally makes sense why people would get an eerie feeling just being around that area at all. In our number 8 spot today, we have Dragon Lodge. Dragon Lodge sits on the Peak, which is one of the most expensive areas in Hong Kong for real estate, and while that means that it comes with a heavy price tag, it is also rich with terrifying tales. Dragon Lodge is said to have had many owners throughout the years, the first of which being the man who built it, but in 1920 he went bankrupt and was forced to sell it. During World War II, the lodge was occupied by Japanese soldiers, some of which are said to have taken the lives of Catholic nuns in the front courtyard. By the time the 1980s rolled around, Dragon Lodge was already referred to as one of Hong Kong's most haunted places, but despite the rumblings, the property was purchased again and there were plans for some retail development. These plans fell through, however, because when construction workers began to do some work, they too became convinced of its paranormal nature. The workers continually reported the sounds of a crying child coming from the mansion and refused to continue to work on it. Since then, the mansion has remained completely untouched. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Sai Ying Pun Community Complex. This complex was first built in 1892, but its original purpose was to house medical staff. This was until the Second World War took place, and during this time it is said to have turned into quite a gruesome execution ground, and after this, the site later became a psychiatric hospital. And after it was abandoned, it was badly damaged when trespassers set fires in it, really just setting the stage for an exceptionally eerie location. In 1998, the building was given a new life once again, and it was turned into a community complex, but now there are plenty of strange reports coming from the building. While they preserved the granite exterior, inside people have reported hearing the sounds of a woman crying, mysterious footsteps. There have been alleged sightings of a devil-like man wearing traditional clothing roaming around the halls. There's said to be a ghost that bursts into flames. This is all to say that there are plenty of ghosts here. While they are trying to do their best to rebrand this haunted location, the nickname High Street Haunted House hasn't quite escaped it yet. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Louis Sang Chung. Back in 2012, this location was turned into a Chinese medicine and healthcare center for Baptist University, but prior to that, it sat empty for decades due to the haunting tales that come from within. It is said that there were plans to remodel the building a while ago, back in the 80s, but those working on the building, construction and cleaning crew alike, began to fall ill one by one. At first I thought that there were probably just some toxic chemicals in the building or something like that, but it wasn't the same illness. Things were different, and sometimes it was an illness, it was a fatal accident. Things were also disappearing, and this all led to the work on the building being stopped. Some of the workers even reported seeing figures, like a group of children playing soccer, but instead of a ball, it was a head. Sometimes at night, the upper level floors would light up on their own and shadowy figures could be seen roaming around the hallways. In our number 5 spot today, we have Bride's Pool. While Bride's Pool is gorgeous, it's a rock pool with waterfalls surrounding it. It gets its name and haunting story from a tragic accident. Legend goes that 4 men were carrying a bride-to-be to her groom's village on a chair, and to get to the village, they needed to pass over the pool. As they pass over one of the waterfalls, one of the men slipped on a rock, and all of them fell below into the pool, sadly passing away in the tragic accident. Now the bride, having never made it to her groom, awaits at the bottom of the pool, waiting for her groom to return. There have also been reports of people taking their lives here, and in 1982, at one point, there were even human remains discovered that turned out to belong to a man who was killed by his fiancée. The horrible stories clearly just don't end, and they even extend up to the road that sits above the pool, which now has the nickname of the Deadly Curve, based on the high number of accidents that resulted into fatalities. Maybe it's just the bad luck of the pool. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Murray House. This is another one of these spots that now has a life far past its haunting history. The Murray House is now the home to restaurants that sit on the waterfront and places to shop, but it once was the officers' quarters of the Murray Barracks in 1846. Flash forward a bit to the Japanese occupation, and this building was seeing horrifying crimes carried out against the citizens of Hong Kong. From here, stories of ghosts and hauntings at the site became so bad that the government actually ordered for there to be 2 exorcisms there, one in 1963 and one in 1974, and they were aimed at freeing these souls who were clearly stuck here. Eventually, the building was dismantled and all of the items in the house were moved into storage for a while before, in 2000, it was decided to move and rebuild the structure to Stanley, where it still stands now. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Nam Kwu Terrace. This location was first built in 1915 by a wealthy family who was involved in the silk trade. The same family lived here until World War II when they were forced to flee the city. Once abandoned by the family, soldiers began to seize property in the area to hold people and items, and this specific location was used to house women who were being held by the soldiers. These soldiers did horrific things to these women, some leading to the women passing away, and since these incredibly atrocious acts, the terrace has constantly had stories coming from it that tell the tales of ghosts wandering the house. Some passerbys even hear screaming coming from the home and see strange shadows in the windows. Back in 2003, a group of students decided to try and camp out for a night in the haunted house in the hopes of seeing a ghost, but in the end they got a lot more than they bargained for. Police ended up being called when one of the students claimed to be possessed by a spirit and ended up needing to be hospitalized. In the end, the home sat completely vacant for 18 years until recently, when the current owners expressed their plans to restore the building. In our number 2 spot today, we have Solo Pun. This abandoned village has a name that means locked compass, and this name comes from the reports that compasses very creepily seem to stop working nearby and in this village. The exact reason for the abandonment of this village is unknown. There are plenty of stories, however. Some believe that everyone went missing overnight, others believe that the villagers died on the way to a wedding in a boating accident and the survivors couldn't stand to remain in the village. Whatever the reason, the village appears as if one day everybody just up and left, never to be seen again. This is why this spot is now a heavily visited area. It definitely gives that eerie, uneasy feeling when you're around it. If you were to take a trip there, the closest road is about 3 hours away, however, so you'll find yourself hiking for quite a good chunk of that trip. In our number 1 spot today, we have the White House Compound. Also known as the Victoria Road Detention Center, this place is familiar to many as it was used as a place to hold political prisoners and those suspected of spying during the 1967 riots. This means that it was also a place where many people were treated horribly, harmed, and executed. Prisoners were held in tiny cells under horrible conditions, and some even were held in solitary confinement for months on end. After the end of the riots, the place was abandoned, and it was forgotten about by many, except for those who knew what kind of horrors happened inside. From the time it was abandoned up until quite recently, this place was unmarked. There weren't signs, and it wasn't even placed on maps. That was until 2018, when it was converted into an overseas campus for the University of Chicago Booth School of Business as a way to redevelop the site and hopefully give it a much brighter future.
Starting us off at number 10, Lafitte Guest House. Once the mansion of a very rich man named Paul Gleese and his family, by the 20th century the building became a hotel and has been visited by countless guests throughout the years. But despite the many families that have lived in the mansion prior, it is not them who haunts the building, but a girl named Marie who died of yellow fever while staying in room 21 with her mother. Legend has it that her mother was so distraught by Marie's death that she would often revisit the hotel and stay in the very room where Marie lost her life. And years later, she too died in room 21. The two ghosts haunt the grounds, terrifying visitors who stay in their room, perhaps hoping to convince them never to return. Those that have stayed report seeing Marie in the mirror in the middle of the night, and that during the day she can be seen walking around the grounds, striking up a conversation with you before vanishing into thin air. And if that doesn't freak you out, the mother's gut-wrenching sobs can also be heard at night, and she too has been known to frighten the guests by turning the lights on and off or throwing objects around to get your attention. All those that enter the room claim to immediately feel a sense of despair and sorrow come over them, and none that visit wish to return. Coming in at number 9, the Logan Mansion. Built in 1897 for a beer distributor named Lafayette R. Logan, this mansion is believed to be haunted by the ghost of a girl named Theodora Hunt, allegedly the neighbor of Mr. Logan, who one day leapt out of a third-floor window in the attic and plummeted to her death. For years, it has been regarded as one of the most haunted places in the state, with many recent visitors claiming to see items moving on their own, doors mysteriously locking and unlocking themselves, and the giggles of Theodora Hunt coming from the attic. While Theodora tends to be more mischievous than anything, there have been other visitors claiming to hear haunting voices and apparitions in the window where Theodora allegedly fell to her death, and some fear that she has company, and that is what most are truly afraid of. Next up at number 8, the Shreverport Municipal Auditorium. Built between 1926 to 1929, it originally served to commemorate the soldiers who served and lost their lives to World War I. Nowadays, it's a historical performance and meeting venue and widely known to be riddled with ghosts and paranormal activity. Audience members, tour guides, and staff alike have all experienced something strange while spending time in the building, like doors opening and shutting all on their own, disembodied voices echoing throughout the halls, as well as strange, inexplicable sounds lurking in the shadows. Although not all the spirits are terrifying, one reportedly is often heard clapping and saying, "I love Johnny Cash." There are far more creepy ghosts than friendly ones. Reportedly, a girl is often seen running around the auditorium and no one knows just who she is or why she's there. And according to legends, during the Louisiana hayride, a woman died in labor in the basement bathroom, and some claim to have heard her moans as if she is still trying to deliver. Coming in at number 7, the Miller Cemetery. Located in Eunice, Louisiana, the Miller Cemetery has more than just buried bodies to creep out visitors. One ghost in particular is known to haunt the grounds, and it's because of him that locals nicknamed it the Headless Cemetery. The Headless Ghost is known to frequent the area, roaming around the graves at night and terrifying guests. But what's strange about this ghost is he's not headless for any horrific death, but allegedly because nobody remembers his face due to the unrecognizable picture on his tombstone, or at least that's the legend we've been told. If a headless ghost isn't enough to keep you away, many have also reported their cars suddenly not working or breaking down as soon as they are on the gravel road by the cemetery. So if you do dare enter, you might just be stranded, and who knows what the headless ghost will do to you then. Next up at number 6, Forbing Tracks. Strangely, or maybe not so strangely, I don't really know the statistics on this one, Miller Cemetery is not the only place in Louisiana where a headless ghost is known to roam. The Forbing Railroad tracks as well have terrifying ghosts that many claim to haunt the grounds at night. Legend has it, one night an old man was reportedly beheaded, and his ghost now wanders the tracks holding a lantern and scaring all that see him. But that isn't all. Apparently a bunch of students also died here many years ago after allegedly being hit by an oncoming train. Legend has it that if you park your car on the tracks and put flour on the back of it, it will mysteriously begin to move on its own, showing the handprints of the students in the flour on the back. But if I were you, I would not try it out for yourself, otherwise you too might be a ghost haunting the tracks of Forbing, Louisiana. Next up at number 5, Magnolia Plantation. I am sure it comes as no surprise that a plantation would be the breeding grounds for tortured spirits, considering how much horrifying and cruel activity occurred on their property during the early to mid 19th century. And Magnolia's plantation is among some of the most haunted. There are stories that a large portion of the activity at this plantation has to do with the countless voodoo curses that were placed on the original owners, but others say that the real horrors of the property are due to the dying room. The name was given to the haunted room as there have been countless tales of slaves and other residents taking their lives in it when they could no longer endure the agony of their existence. Visitors have reported hearing their screams from the dying room to this day, as well as seeing the many spirits lurk around the property. As well, a Union major is believed to have been poisoned in the same room, and sometimes at night you can see his distorted face in the window of the very room he died in. Others claim to have heard chanting, slamming doors, flickering lights, and investigators have even captured audio recordings from several spirits, and maybe most crazy is that motion sensors have been known to go off and on when no one was around. Listen, everyone that visits agrees they are not wanted there. Coming in at number 4, Tefrair's house. Although now it's a cozy bed and breakfast, Tefrair's has a dark history from its time as a plantation, and as such it comes with a bevy of ghost sightings that will chill you to the bone. The most well-known legend of the property is that a woman named Amélie Comeau once jumped into a well after losing her family to yellow fever. Her body was later buried on the property, and some believe she still haunts the grounds, weeping for the family she lost. Others have reported a little girl living in the attic that may come and speak to you, usually asking you to viens voir, which means come see in French, and I'm afraid to know just what she may want you to come up and see. Originally there was a piano in the house that guests could play, but it had to be removed after countless complaints of it being played in the middle of the night and waking up guests. But of course, when the owner would go to check, no one would ever be playing it. So if you're feeling brave, you can go ahead and stay, but as for me, I think I will look for somewhere where a creepy girl ghost doesn't try to swoon me into following her up into an attic. Coming in at number 3, Central Louisiana State Hospital. Believed to be haunted by the near 3,000 patients that are buried on the grounds, this psychiatric facility from 1904 is actually still operating today, believe it or not. Reportedly haunted by all those that died on its grounds, many hospital staff claim to experience extremely strange and creepy activity nearly every single day. Many say they constantly hear slamming doors from one secured only moments prior, witnessing chairs being flipped over when no one was in the room, and even glasses shattering after being hucked across the room. On one occasion, a piece of flooring was discovered broken into pieces, almost as if exploded. Nothing had been broken moments earlier, and none of the staff could figure out how it broke, or rather, what had broken it. As it's still a fully functioning hospital, it's not open to visitors, but some will walk past the building and swear they can hear strange voices or bright shining lights coming from inside the building. Coming in at number 2, Dauphine Orleans Hotel. The historic Dauphine Orleans Hotel opened somewhere around the 1770s and has remained one of the most well-known buildings in the French Quarter, but not for its hospitality, instead for its terrifying ghost sightings. Back in its heyday, there was a brothel in the French Quarter owned by a woman named May Bailey. And what was especially unique about Bailey's business was that she actually had a permit for it, making it completely legal. But despite its legality and popularity among many, May Bailey's sister, Millie, resented her for forcing her into the line of work. Hoping for a way out, Millie ended up meeting a Confederate soldier and the two got engaged. But sadly, on the morning of the wedding, her betrothed was shot dead. And so Millie remained trapped to her life of courtship. Today, visitors and staff have reported seeing her roam the halls in her wedding dress, sobbing and crying out for her lost love. But that is not the worst that's been witnessed. Employees say they routinely see glasses fall off shelves, doors unlatched after just being locked, and there is even one account of a bar stool levitating off the ground. But most terrifying of all are the legends of guests checking in and never leaving the hotel. So if I were you, I would pick somewhere else to stay for the night. And last up in our number 1 spot, Hotel Provincial. Branded as one of the most haunted places in New Orleans, the Hotel Provincial is located in the infamously haunted French Quarter, and just like every building around it, of course, it's horrifyingly haunted. Now, back in the day, there was a military hospital just down the street from the hotel, and one of the buildings used a medicinal herb garden for the hospital, which seems a little strange, but does make sense once you find out the kind of spirits that haunt the hall. Today, the hotel consists of 5 buildings, and although ghosts are known to lurk in each, the most haunted building is believed to be number 5. Guests of building number 5 have reported seeing insane things such as Confederate soldiers covered in blood, moaning from agonizing pain, who miraculously disappear once the lights turn on. Others have reported apparitions of surgeons in the halls, and maybe most disturbing is the amount of guests that have seen strange pools of blood appear on their bedding or the floor that disappear just as fast as they came into view. One guest even reported that as the elevator door opened on the hotel's second floor, the hospital was entirely in view. So it seems as though the soldiers that died in the hospital down the street took a liking to the hotel and continue to haunt all the visitors who enter to this day.